4.
Okay, this is lesson 3, section 3, part 2, and I'm going to render the 2 cubes that I did in the previous video demonstration. I'm going to imagine that the light source is kind of coming from in front high. So this side of my cube will be the dark side, the right side will be the medium side, and the top, which will receive most of the light, will be the lightest side. One of the interesting things that you can do with these markers on trace paper is to blend them. And trace paper does not absorb the ink. It lays on the surface for just a short time, and by laying on the surface, you're able to blend your markers. So I'm going to start in this back corner with a dark marker, and I'll start with a dark 9 or 10, fairly dark marker color, and just fill in a little bit of the dark marker color on the top and the bottom. And then I'll take a lighter color, in this case a 7, and I'm going to bring my marker back into the darker color, and then as I bring it forward, you will see that the marker is going to blend the darker color in the background to a slightly lighter color up forward. And I'll just add this marker in. Now on trace paper, one of the things that you've got to get used to is you are going to see marker strokes. So it's not going to be a perfectly smooth blend. Now there are some techniques that you can do to give it a little smoother, and that's using alcohol or cleaner to kind of create a smoother blend. But I'm not going to worry about that. I like kind of the sketchiness of this. And I'll do the same thing on the marker here. I'll start with the darker color in the background, and then I'm going to blend it forward. I started with a cool gray 10, and then I'm going to take a cool gray 7 and start back in the 10 area, and now just move this forward. And I'm not picking up my marker, I'm just leaving it on the paper, top to bottom. If you pick it up, you're going to get little splotches and things. And I want to make this just a little smoother blend, so I'll go back over it a second time, and I've got just a little smoother blend. Again, I'm not worried at all about those lines on the paper. Now let's take a lighter color. And on my lighter color, I'll start with maybe a 5 in the background. And you'll see that it will erase a little bit of these preliminary lines that I laid down with my Sharpie marker. So I'm going to start here, and then I'll take a lighter color, maybe a gray 3, 4, 3, and just blend it forward a little bit. Slightly lighter color. Just picking up a little bit of the ink. I can already start to smooth out my ellipse a little bit. I'll add just a little bit darker color in the back. Now when you're doing these drawings as a homework assignment, you can take just a little more time trying to get a smoother blend. And blending is a skill, and it does take just a little bit of practice. You're never perfect with it the first few times you're doing it. So again, I'll start with a slightly darker color in the back here, and then I'm going to blend it forward. Keeping my marker on the paper, just going top to bottom. I want to go just a little bit darker in the background on this one, and then I'll bring it slightly forward. All right, so I've got my blends, and you notice that I'm not being overly concerned staying in the lines or really being perfect about this. Let's add a little bit of shadow and depth to this ellipse. There there's probably going to be some kind of shadow. I'm making this a hole, so you're not going to see all the way into it. At some point, the light is just going to fade out. You're not going to see much at all. So I'll just darken that up. I might even go over it with black. And now let's take and add just a little bit of depth, kind of some lines that are sort of going back to the horizon line. Erasing a few of these layout lines that I had on my drawing. Now let's just try and smooth out the ellipse a little bit with the markers. And I'll even take a darker, I'm not sure I've got black here. So let's just take the tin. I'll just darken this up a little bit here. And now let's do the other cylinder. And I'll start by putting kind of a little core line in here on the cylinder. Again, as I do this, I kind of erase some of those original layout lines. And now I'm going to blend this dark color just a little bit down and blend it up. And then I'll take my lightest marker and do just a little more blending. And I can erase a few of these guidelines that were originally placed on my drawing. Cylinders are usually rendered in bands of light. Let's make it look like it's going into a slight little hole here. So if I just take and add a darker color around the back. Sort of cleans up my drawing just a little bit. And on the front surface, since this is just a flat surface, I'm just going to add just a little bit of marker just to kind of mostly even things out here. Erase some of my preliminary lines. And this interlocking cube, the top one, could reflect down just slightly into the bottom cube. So coming to the top, I think on the back side I could add just a little bit of a reflection here. And maybe fake in, as Jessica did on one of the earlier drawings, just a couple little lines that suggest reflectivity. And then what I can do from this point is just tighten up my drawing. My ellipse is just a little bit lumpy here, so I want to try and smooth that out slightly. And I can harden up this edge with just a little more care. And then I want to come back and define these cubes. And notice I'm going to leave some of these lines overlapping a little bit. It just adds, I think, an interesting character to your drawing. It makes them look more sketchy. And when they're looking like a sketch, they look just a little more interesting. One other thing you can do to drawings to give it a little emphasis is to do something called a vignette or a background. And I'm going to take a dark color. In this case, I'll just take a tin, and I'm going to emphasize the shape of my object a little bit here with the background. And it also tends to tighten up the drawing. In these backgrounds, you want to be careful that you don't overdo it. They ought to look a little painterly. And so you notice that I've got some lines that are overlapping and little little marks just to add character to the drawing. And I think that's about all I really have to do. I'm going to add just a little more weight to a few of these lines. Again, giving it just a little more interest. Maybe there's even a little shadow under here. I'll put that in right now. And my drawing is pretty much finished. And I'll call it quits. So hopefully you can use some of these techniques when you're doing your homework assignment. Practice blending markers. It's really a nice skill to develop. Try adding bands of shadow and light to emphasize the shape and the look of a cylinder. And try to add a little bit of line overlap on your drawing. Keep this drawing looking sketchy as opposed to really precise and perfect. And I think when your drawings look sketchy, look like they're done quick, your client isn't going to be looking at the drawing and saying, boy, how much money did I spend to have this guy do this drawing for me? Rather, they can look at it and say, oh, this was done quickly, it's not costing me a lot of money. And I think that makes you look a lot more favorable to your client than it might otherwise appear. So that finishes up this lesson. Hopefully you'll have some success as you try some of these skills.